2 weeks before my wife's funeral, my daughter, who's always had a sense of entitlement, cornered me in the kitchen and said, "Dad, we need to talk about Mom's car." She had no idea I was hiding something on four wheels she would never get her hands on. Before we continue, thank you so much for your support. Every like, comment, and view means the world to us. We're on a mission to reach our first 1,000 subscribers, and we'd love for you to be part of that journey. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and let's grow together. Now, let's proceed. 2 weeks before my wife's funeral, I was in the kitchen, holding a mug of coffee that had gone lukewarm in my hands. I wasn't really drinking it. I was just there, staring at nothing. The house was quieter than I ever remembered, like the walls themselves knew she wasn't here anymore. Then I heard the sharp, rhythmic click of high heels on the tile floor. My daughter walked in. "No, hi, Dad. No, how are you holding up?" She just stood there in the doorway, one hand on her hip, eyes fixed on me like I was keeping something from her. "Dad," she said, "we need to talk about Mom's car." The words hit harder than they should have. Maybe it was the timing, maybe it was the tone, matter of fact, almost impatient, as if this conversation had been long overdue and I was the one dragging my feet. I didn't answer right away. I set the mug down on the counter and turned toward her. She had her arms folded, her head tilted slightly, wearing that same expression she had when she wanted something and already believed she was going to get it. "What about it?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Her lips curled in the faintest smile, the kind that wasn't warm, just self-satisfied. "Well," she said, "it only makes sense that I take it now. Mom would have wanted me to have it." I had to take a slow breath to keep from reacting. My wife's car was more than a possession. It was part of her. I could still see her behind the wheel, hair blowing in the wind, that mischievous smile on her face when she'd accelerate a little too much on an empty road. My daughter wasn't thinking about any of that. She was thinking about herself, about being seen in it, parking it outside brunch spots, letting people assume she'd earned something she hadn't. She went on, "You've already got your truck, Dad. You don't need it. I can take care of it better, and besides, I think I deserve something of hers." Deserve. That was the word that stuck in my head like a splinter. My daughter had lived her whole life with the belief that things should come to her, that timing, effort, and fairness were all negotiable as long as she wanted something badly enough. I knew this wasn't grief talking. This was entitlement talking. I could see it in her eyes. I could feel it in the way she leaned casually on the counter, like we were discussing weekend plans instead of her mother's cherished car. What she didn't know, what she could never have guessed, was that there was another car, one she had never seen. My wife and I had bought it quietly, years ago, during one of our date nights. We had gone out for dinner, taken the long way home, and spotted it in the window of a dealership on the edge of town. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't the kind of car that screamed for attention. It was the kind of beauty you kept for yourself. My wife had looked at me that night and said, "Let's keep this one between us. Some things are better when they're just ours." I had agreed, and we had kept that secret ever since. The car she wanted now, the one she thought was the crown jewel of her mother's possessions, was nothing compared to that other one. But I wasn't about to let her know. Not yet. Revenge, in my experience, works best when it's quiet and patient. So I simply said, "I'll think about it." The words seemed to throw her off. She'd come in ready for an argument, ready to push until she got her way. But now she had nothing to push against. Her smile faltered just slightly before she straightened up and said, "Good. Just don't take too long, Dad. I don't want it sitting there gathering dust." She walked out without another word, her heels echoing down the hallway, leaving the air in the kitchen heavier than before. I stood there for a long time after she left, my hand still on the counter, thinking about the promise I'd made to my wife. That second car wasn't just a vehicle. It was a piece of her, of us, that didn't belong in greedy hands. My daughter would never respect it, never see it as anything more than a trophy, and I wasn't about to watch her turn it into one. Over the next few days, she made little check-ins. A text here, a comment there. "Have you decided yet? It'd be better if I had it before winter, you know." She tried to keep her tone casual, but I could see the impatience growing. She thought I was stalling because I was sentimental, that eventually I'd hand it over just to avoid the tension. She didn't realize my mind was already made up. This wasn't about stalling. This was about teaching her a lesson I should have taught years ago. And so I waited, not to punish her in the moment, but to make the ending all the more satisfying. She thought the car was already hers. She thought she had me cornered. But she had no idea that not only was she not getting that car, she'd be losing something much bigger. If you want, I can now write chapter 2, the funeral and the reveal, where the confrontation reaches its peak and the twist with the other car hits hard. This will be the revenge payoff. The morning of the funeral came with that heavy stillness that makes even simple movements feel like you're wading through water. I dressed in the suit my wife always said made me look serious but kind, and I paused in the hallway longer than I should have, staring at the framed photos that tracked our life from clumsy newlyweds to seasoned partners who could read each other's thoughts across a crowded room. When I stepped outside, I saw my daughter already waiting in the driveway. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the car, that car, like it was a promise spoken aloud. She had placed her handbag on the hood as if staking a claim, fingers tapping with a satisfied rhythm, eyes flicking to me only to check whether I would object. I didn't. I just unlocked my truck and told her to ride with me. She frowned, but climbed in, making a point to say she'd handle the car later, like we were simply closing out a bill. The service was crowded, which surprised no one. My wife had the kind of quiet impact that made neighbors act like family and old colleagues show up with tears they didn't bother to hide. Eulogies came and went. People spoke about small kindnesses she gave away without receipts, showing up with soup when someone was sick, watching a neighbor's kid during an emergency, calling back even when she had nothing to say except, "I'm here." When it was my turn, I kept my voice steady and told the truth. She had been my compass, and without her I felt turned around in my own house. As I stepped down, I caught my daughter's expression. It wasn't griefless. She did love her mother, but threaded through her tears was an alertness, the kind you see in people who are counting ahead while everyone else is counting memories. I knew then that my plan had to land with clarity, not cruelty, and with a lesson strong enough to echo after the flowers wilted. After the cemetery, people streamed back to the house for coffee and those casseroles that appear when words fail. My daughter slipped away and reappeared near the front window, keys dangling from her finger like jewelry. I knew whose keys they were. She had fished them from the bowl by the door with the confidence of someone taking back what she believed already belonged to her. I let the wake breathe for another hour. Let people tell stories. Let the house fill with the familiar footfalls of those who loved my wife. Then I excused myself quietly and stepped out to the driveway. The car sat where it always did, polished for the day because I owed my wife that much, though I hadn't driven it. My daughter followed 2 minutes later, lips tight, posture poised. "I'll take it now," she said, like a foregone conclusion. Mom would have wanted me to look after it. I didn't reach for the keys. I didn't argue. I just told her the first truth she needed to hear. That car is no longer here for you to take. Her smile snapped, confusion rushing in to replace certainty. She lifted the keys with a defiant little shake, as if the metal itself could overrule me. "I literally have the keys, Dad." I nodded and explained, calm and clean, that the title had been transferred the previous day. The car had been sold legally, paperwork finalized, funds cleared. Her face moved through disbelief to anger in seconds, and she let out a laugh that had no humor in it at all. "Sold? On the week of Mom's funeral? To who? Why would you do that?" I let the hurt in her questions pass through me because there were larger things at stake. I told her the proceeds had gone directly to a foundation in her mother's name, one that funded transportation for single parents who needed reliable cars to keep their jobs. It wasn't random. It was precise. It was exactly who her mother had been. Her voice went sharp with accusation, and she threw words like stones, selfish, punitive, vindictive, each one missing the point by a mile. The more she raged, the more clearly I saw the line we needed to draw. I told her the donation wasn't a punishment. It was a tribute that turned a symbol into action, something her mother would have called the right kind of beautiful. I also told her I had left a plaque in the foundation office with my wife's name and one of her favorite phrases, share quietly or don't share at all. For a beat, she went silent, as if the sentence pushed on a door in her memory she wasn't ready to open. Then she rallied, hands on hips, insisting there had to be something left for family, as if inheritance were the only proof of closeness. People inside the house were watching from the window now. I let them see. Not to humiliate her, but because secrecy had fed this pattern for too long. That was when I set the second truth on the table, the one I had carried like a sealed envelope through grief and logistics and sleepless nights. I told her there was another car. Her chin lifted, a flicker of triumph leaking through her anger. There it is, the prize behind the curtain. I let the silence sit long enough to make that assumption bloom. Then I finished the sentence. There's another car your mother loved, and it is not yours, not now, not ever. I told her about the quiet purchase on a rainy night, about my wife's soft grin when we sat in the driver's seat and decided to keep it ours alone. I told her about the promise, that I would protect it from being paraded as a trophy, that it would be driven only by someone who understood why some beauty stays private, why some things are sacred because they aren't for applause. My daughter's eyes narrowed. So you hid it. I shook my head. Your mother asked me to hold it. Words matter. She demanded to see it. She insisted that as next of kin she had rights. She threatened to call a lawyer, then an uncle, then a friend who knew about these things, piling names in front of me like barricades that might change the terrain. I didn't flinch. I had already spoken with the attorney who handled our family matters and with the executor designated in my wife's documents. The language was clear, and more than legal language, the moral language was crystal. The car was entrusted to me, not to the estate, not as a cashable item, but as a keepsake bound to a promise. I told her she could call anyone she liked. The result would be the same. She stared at me like I had grown a new face, one that would not yield to her practiced insistence. Then she threw the keys to the sold car at the ground and stormed back inside, brushing past two neighbors who stepped aside, startled by the force of a wind they couldn't see but could definitely feel. I waited until the house emptied before I acted on the last part of the plan. When the sun folded itself into evening, I drove across town to the storage unit that had become a small sanctuary. The manager nodded when he saw me, the way people do when they know they're witnessing a private ritual. Inside, beneath a simple cover, sat the other car, unassuming to someone who chases shiny things, quietly breathtaking to someone who loves craft. I ran my hand along the fender, and for the first time in days, I let myself smile without apology. I could almost hear my wife tease me. You're not going to cry on the upholstery, are you? I whispered back that I'd save the tears for the road. I slid into the seat, turned the key, and the engine answered with that restrained purr we both loved. I drove slowly at first, then steadier, feeling the machine settle under me like a memory being honored with motion. When I pulled onto our street, a few last visitors were leaving. My daughter stood at the curb with her arms folded, phone in hand, texting with the ferocity of someone trying to enlist allies. The headlights cut across her, and even before I rolled to a stop, she knew this wasn't a neighbor's car or a rental. It wasn't flashy, not a status symbol she could post for likes, but it had a presence that turned her posture brittle. She stepped forward, squinting, expression morphing from confusion to calculation to something that looked dangerously close to understanding. I parked without hurry, cut the engine, and stepped out. She looked at the car, then at me, and the first sentence out of her mouth was small, almost a child's, despite the steel she wrapped herself in. I didn't know. I nodded. You didn't want to know. Those are different. We stood there a long moment, the evening settling around us. I told her the final piece because it mattered. That her mother had noticed the way every gift became a performance, the way gratitude turned into leverage, the way I deserve kept showing up in place of I'm thankful. I told her the donation was not a theft. It was a transformation that multiplied her mother's care into motion for people who needed it. I told her this car was not a secret meant to punish her, but a promise meant to preserve my wife's quiet joys from being paraded and consumed. Then I said the part I'd avoided for years. I failed you when I taught you that demanding worked. I won't fail you that way anymore. She looked at the pavement, at the car, at me. For once she didn't reach for a counterargument. She just breathed, shallow and uncertain, like a swimmer realizing how far from shore she had drifted. I opened the passenger door, and, for a heartbeat, she thought I was offering her a seat. I wasn't. I took out a small envelope from the glove compartment and handed it to her. Inside was a photograph. My wife and me sitting in this very car on the night we bought it, rain streaking the windshield, her head tilted toward me with that grin she never wasted on people who didn't understand her. On the back, in her handwriting, were the words, "For us. Keep it ours." My daughter traced the letters with her thumb, and her face loosened in a way I hadn't seen in years. "I miss her," she said, and the sentence landed with the weight of something finally honest. "Good," I answered softly. "Let that be where you start." I got in, closed the door, and the world outside became a softer shape through the glass. As I pulled away, I didn't accelerate to make a point. I didn't look back to win a scene. I drove the way my wife and I always did in this car, unhurried, clear, present, letting the road carry the promise we made on a rainy night. Behind me, my daughter stood holding a photograph instead of keys, and for the first time in a long time, what she had in her hands might teach her more than what she wanted ever could. The lesson was simple, and I left it in the dust between us. Some things are loved, not owned. Some good is done, not displayed. And some treasures live precisely because they are kept out of reach. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and help us reach our first 1,000 subscribers. Your support means the world to us.